world? Welcome to X Planet Live. My name is Lionel Miranda, and this is 40K Friday. So what are we going to be discussing today? My feelings about Warhammer 40,000 as it stands for me right now. Now, I got to emphasize, this is a 100% completely biased opinion, as it would be, seeing that you're on my channel and all. And it's not to say that I am right. Everyone is entitled to to have an opinion, and this is just simply mine. I just have the benefit of having a camera. So there you go. Take that for what it's worth, is basically what I'm saying. 40K. How do I feel about it? I'm going to go a quick TLDR and get right to the point. I love 40K. Now, for those of you who have known me for the past, gosh, I guess 4 to maybe 8 years, you'd be like maybe a little shocked about that. I don't know, but 40K has been on an interesting trip for me, and I've had a really long history with 40K, and I'm going to say a love affair for the game. There are definite additions I did not like, but in the case of this one, I really love 10th. Now, this is contrary to some opinions out on the interwebs. There's a lot of hate, or I should say some hate, maybe not a lot. Definitely some hate out there, and I guess this is kind of like a counter video to it, but not in the classic sense. I'm not going to be raving. I'm not going to be going on and on. I'm going to just kind of do a little quick breakdown of basically 40K, how it's been for me over, I guess, decades now. Time goes by really, really quick. All right, so what do I really love about the game? It's not perfect, but what do I currently love about the game right now? I love the puzzle of what 40K represents right now. I love the cards. I love having to position my troops and stage them. I love having to figure out what possibly could happen, what I could draw off the deck. I love that I'm thinking about how to screw up potential secondaries for my opponent. I love the concept of playing for primaries, and whether I do that in some cases or sometimes kind of give it up in other cases depending on my matchup. I love that shifting of gears. I love all the decision points that 40K gives me. From a solo perspective, gaming-wise, and from a team's perspective. I run a lot of events here in the shop and outside the shop. And one of the coolest things about 40K currently right now is it feels very much like an arena game. You have your pitch and you bring on your team and you're playing and trying to score in various ways. And from that kind of perspective, I think 10th edition is probably the best version of that kind of experience that I have seen in any edition. What I also really, really love about the game is the current balance between all the factions. Obviously, when it came out of the gate, there was some, how would you say, discrepancies between the top and the bottom for certain, and that would be the greatest criticism of the game, especially initially. I looked at it more broadly and more pragmatically. I looked at the base rules of the game, and what I saw about the base rules I liked. That was kind of a condition I had back in 8th. I liked the base rules a lot too. So the pragmatism into me is like, well, let's see what happens when the codexes start releasing. Well, the codexes started releasing for 10th, and holy cow, would you believe it? They held true to the design that was in the base rules, and in fact, started tweaking armies so that the field would become more leveled. It isn't perfect, but you know what? I would let go of that idea of perfection, which is more or less what they have stated, right? They're trying to hit that little sweet spot of the fat middle, as a lot of guys have coined it, between 45 and 55% win rate. Now, that win rate comes primarily from competitive meta games. So now, we start talking about the downside. The balance did come at a cost. And what it came at the cost of is personality, flavor, character. Armies felt or feel a bit more generic, as some people have said, a bit more generic. Because that is the ultimate tool of balancing, really. When you're approaching the game and you want to make the armies, even, they start looking a lot like each other. Like, I still remember well back in the day when orcs used to be the best melee army in the game. As the editions went on, that changed. There was a design shift. And all of a sudden, they weren't that. And then they became combined arms type style with a emphasis in hand-to-hand combat. That, for me personally, took away from my experience with orcs specifically in 40K. Now, that is just an anecdotal thing. And again, it's a very, very biased perspective of one army in 32 or whatever the heck it is in 40K currently right now. So it's take that for what it's worth. But the concept of the game being kind of scrubbed of personality is, I think, where a lot of the criticism of 10th comes from. It's not a deal breaker for me. I look at 30K, for instance, and if you've not played 30K, folks, well, I'll give you the quick little synopsis of it. Everyone's a Space Marine, more or less. So everyone has the same stat line. Everyone has access to the same equipment. And then the differences are the Legion traits and 1 or 2 unique units. To say that those armies do not have character would be incorrect. If you ask any 30K player, they'll wax on poetic about their armies. So why is it different in 40K? I mean, why do people look at 40K and go, well, yeah, but it just feels it lost so much? It's because 40K used to have so much personality, so many special rules, so many rules that did the same thing were called something different. That was a bucking bronco that the design team had a hard time wrangling. And the concept of actually removing special rules, I think, is the direction that they went. But because of that, and I'm going a little circular, I'll try to stay on track here. Because of that, it did lose a lot of flavor. The other concept of 40K currently right now that I'm not super keen on are the tables. All the tables, welcome to the land of L. L's everywhere. Everything has to be set exactly right. The concept of uneven side, are you kidding me? No way, man. We can't have uneven sides. That would be far too much. Everything has to be precise. And that sterilizes the battlefield. It takes away from the immersion of a war game. We'll flash back over to 30K. If you have no interest in 30K, I'm not asking you to have interest in 30K. I'm not even saying it's a better game, by the way. What I'm saying is if you look at a battle report for 30K, you'll find the tables are extremely interesting. Very characterful. Lots of lots of buildings and ruins, sure, but then they'll also have big rock outcroppings, forests, bits and parts everywhere. And the table feels like it's a battlefield. When you're playing 40K currently right now, you feel like you're entering a stadium. And although fantastic for competitive play, it is terrible from a narrative perspective. I'm going to avoid the word casual because I do believe that a lot of competitive players also appreciate beautiful tables. I think that's true. I mean, we're all freaking nerds. We all love our toy soldiers. And why wouldn't we want really cool terrain? It's just currently right now 40K restrains on where that terrain can go and how it's done. And that would be the downside. That would be one of the negatives I have for the game. So where do these feelings come out of? So I briefly touched about it in broad terms, but I want to introduce something to you all that maybe some of you might not have heard about. And that's the concept of psychographic profiles. I know sounds crazy, but we all have general personality traits. Some companies, like Wizards of the Coast, for instance, wanted to understand their customer base better. Now, this is something I went over when I did this version of a video for Age of Sigmar, and you're more than welcome to check that out. It's just about 8 days old now. So I want to reiterate it because I feel it's very important for 40K as well. So Wizards of the Coast were trying to figure out why certain sets sold like gangbusters and others were just dead on arrival. And so they held surveys, and through those surveys, they started seeing what customers wanted, and it started breaking up into roughly 3 categories. And the 3 categories are this. Now, they gave them names, and the names are Timmy, Johnny, and Spike. So, although fun, what do they actually mean? So what's a Timmy? Timmies are the guys that are shouting "whoa" across the table in the halls. They're the guys that are having great times at the table, generally speaking. They're buying beers for their opponent. They're guys that love being part of teams. One of the reasons why I freaking love teams. Just a little sidetrack here. If you've not played a miniature game in a team style format, I highly recommend it. So good. But they love being part of the whole team, the camaraderie that comes from that. Timmies are there for the experience. So when it comes to going to a tournament, for a Tim, it's not about just winning, where they get their satisfaction. They actually, what scratches their itch is the vibe in the room. Were my buddies all there? Were everyone happy at the event? Was I uncomfortable? Was I rubbing shoulders or elbows with too many people? It's about the experience. So with Tim's, it is all about their feelings about it. And as long as they feel like they can strut their stuff on the battlefield, so for instance, Tims love their big vehicles. They love Land Raiders. Often they are, not always, but often they are Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard players. Big bug Tyranid players. They love stomping around the field because why? Tims have a reel in their head. And as long as that fun is happening on the board, winning is not the deal breaker for them. So then we got Johnnies. Johnnies, where they love the game is their expression of their intelligence. They love seeing paths to victory that maybe someone might not have seen while playing them. They love the combination of abilities and unlocking either through position or combinations of models, and figuring out something that others have not figured out. They love talking about that with you as well. Love sharing that information, whether you want it or not. Johnnies are really all about that expression, that skill set expression, that expression of skill in the game. Then we have our spikes. Spikes are all about the challenge. Spikes are about overcoming. They love winning. Not to the point necessarily of cheating, because that would be the dark side of Spike. But we're talking about the challenge of it. If we're talking the most healthy version of Spike, they're the super honorable guy. They're the guys who play super clean. They punish themselves potentially. Oh, man, I forgot to do that. His opponent will offer, and they're like, no, I missed it. Let's move on. Let's carry on. Because why? They want a clean victory. They want to overcome. If they lose, yes, it sucks because they didn't accomplish their goal. But if they lost in the best way possible, in the cleanest way possible, in the closest way possible, they get deep satisfaction from that. Their game is about challenge and overcoming it. So with those three personality types in mind, those psychographic profiles, let's assume for a sec that every company, when they're releasing a game, should be aiming for that. Does 10th edition 40K deliver that? Does it satisfy the Tims? Do the Tims get to get this great experience from Warhammer 40,000? Does Warhammer 40,000 platform the Johnnies? Does Warhammer 40,000 10th edition challenge the Spikes? I'm going to leave that for you to decide. But with those kind of guideposts in place, how do you see yourself? That's an interesting one. I'm going to go quickly over to the chat right now. I got Mr. David Patton. Love that guy. If you've not seen him before, Other Guys, that's another cast. He's kind of fallen by the wayside. He doesn't feel my tables are competitive enough. I know this, Dave. But that's where you and I are in disagreement. But that's okay, buddy. I still love you. You're definitely my favorite Irishman. All right, so if we go to this, if you simply said, don't like it, and played Curb the Enthusiasm intro, it would be perfect. I know you feel I don't like 40K, and that would have been true of 8th edition and 9th edition. I absolutely detested those two editions of the game. Lots of pushback. I am sure all you wonderful people that played 9th edition will go, no, 9th edition was the best. And my response to that is, was it? Or are we talking about the last month and a half of a 3-year edition? Are you wearing a little bit of rose-colored glasses? Because I'm going to tell you, 9th was this, right? It was just absolute dumpster fire of crazy rules, of the designers just YOLOing. I don't know what. Definitely not my favorite edition. So then we got Scared Cast. Lionel, just simply that, and then a smile. Oh, you sexy man, you hitting on me now? Jeez. We got Diogo. Hey. We got a Fallon Albert fan. With the flavor came a lot of bloat. You're not wrong, sir. We got Mr. Matt Wakefield. L's everywhere sounds like my tournament record. I love you, Matt. And then we got Diogo. Timmy. Indeed, Timmy. So when you guys are now looking at videos and you're hearing these guys crying tears of blood and talking about how much they hate the game and or talking, or you're watching a video where they say they love the game. I want you to keep those archetypes in mind. I bet you any money those things are all relatable. So what am I? How do I view myself as it stands right now? To be completely frank with you, I am a Timmy John guy. That's where I'm coming from. Do I love winning? Yes. But it isn't the thing that gives me deep satisfaction. What gives me deep satisfaction in any event is seeing everyone there, having a great opponent across the table from me. By great opponent, I mean someone who's having a good time, like I'm having a good time. What does that mean? Is he smiling, or is it loose, or are we really super tense? Now, obviously, if we're playing at top tables, that's not fair. But I mean, once you take your first L at a tourney, you're knocked out of contention for almost everything medal-wise. From that point onward, I'm just like going, man, I just hope that from this point onward, I just get to meet four more great people, right? I just want to have good games over this weekend. I love my orcs. So when I first started playing 40K, actually, you know what? This would be a good time to talk about my little, my nerd collection. I've been playing 40K for a very, very long period of time. So this, I'm gonna grab a book here. This is Heroes for Wargamers. Now, Gaio, I'm gonna put it on the mark there, buddy. Now, Heroes for Wargamers was a book that basically advertised itself as a collection of miniature photographs for role-playing games. And funny enough, when I was a young guy, I was in Toronto. Okay, so this is a long time ago. This is back when kids were out for hours, folks. Like, I lived in Mississauga, and for you internationally, you don't know where that is, but I lived in Mississauga, and I biked to Toronto, and this is me at ages 12 or 15. I would disappear for hours, and no one got nervous or upset. As long as I was home before the lights came on, that's the kind of time period we're talking about. All right, so I biked to Toronto as a kid and with buddies, and we discovered this store, and we discovered the Games Workshop, and I was completely enamored with it. Now, that experience, when I first encountered it, was after the purchase of this book. This book was purchased in 1989? No, sorry, it was 86. Yeah, it was 1986. So that's what this book's about. In this book, all it does is it talks about the miniatures and the hobby. And in this book, you will see a young Jess Goodwin, where he's like in his early 20s. It is a just absolutely gorgeous, well, what I think is gorgeous volumes. And I just wanted to show you something here. This is John Blanche's entry. Guy, I don't know if you can see it, but when you get a chance, right where my finger is, this is John Blanche's entry to a Golden Demon. He converted a Minotaur with 3 heads and painted Mona Lisa's face on the banner. I absolutely adore this miniature. Like, how cool is that? Absolutely stunning. So to me, I hadn't been introduced to Warhammer yet. I hadn't been introduced, like 40K didn't exist when this came out, to my understanding anyway. So to me, miniatures were all about role-playing games. All right, so that's that. Enter this. All right. This is the very first Games Workshop product I purchased. Officially Games Workshop. This was Games Workshop published through Paper Tiger. This was Games Workshop. This is not a reprint. This is the original Rogue Trader book I purchased back when I was a kid. So that story where I was telling you I took a bike ride to Toronto and we entered that store, I purchased this book thinking it was a role-playing game. Much to my surprise, when I brought it home, I realized quickly that this was no role-playing game I've ever played, and it was actually my first introduction to miniature wargaming. Back in the day when you played Rogue Trader, it was, I guess it was quasi roleplay. You had to roll for your equipment on all these tables, and you would do all these weird and quirky things. You played with maybe, I don't know, 12, 15 models. It wasn't what it is now, I could tell you that. All right. So the big classic battle back in the Rogue Trader days was the battle at the farm. And it first appeared actually here. All right, Gaio, when you're ready, you can take a shot of that. So this was the classic battle that's been reproduced in White Dwarf, I believe, 2 additional times over the history of White Dwarf. Not many. But the concept here of this, I'll put it back on the mark. So Gaio, if you get to the cover. So this cover right here was the last stand of the Crimson Fists. The orcs that you see in this picture in the background was at the farm at the time. Really, really cool. If I opened up this book too much, the pages will fall out. Yeah, the glue binding back in the day, not so great. So if that was like 86, I think this was like 87? Is that what we're looking at right now? I can't even see this. Don't make fun of me. I know I'm old. I need to raise my guy. Yeah, this was 87. So I don't know how old I was. I was younger. That's what I was. So got introduced to the world of 40,000, and it was just mind-blowing. So Tolkien back in the day was as big a deal back then as it is as you would know it now. So you're a younger guy and you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of Lord of the Rings and all that. Yeah, it was as big a deal then, if not even a bigger deal, because it was newer then. So timeline-wise, they came out with Warhammer, because that's what it was called, just simply Warhammer. And then they came out with Warhammer 40,000, where they took basically Lord of the Rings and sci-fi'd it. And the concept of this caught on fire. Like, it was a huge deal. 40K was a big deal. It was just so compelling seeing orcs with guns, seeing elves with sophisticated, high science fiction type armor. And it was so cool. The concept of space marines, that's where I got first introduced to it. I found out later that it was inspired off of Starship Troopers, the novel series. But for me, it was all the first time. And even back then, when you looked at Rogue Trader, they talk about how the Emperor was interred into the Golden Throne, and the whole concept of 40K was introduced to me through Rogue Trader. It just blew my mind. It was, what a universe. I fell in love with the game then, and ultimately it never really stopped. So here's another fun little thing. I brought a little collection of things for show and tell. This is the first Realms of Chaos. Now this is now seeing a reprint. This at the time was, if that was 87, this was 88, I believe. Yeah, this was 88. And this started introducing the chaos powers. Now, I thought this was a 40K thing at the time. And that's when I started digging into the fantasy side of things. Again, we just referred to the fantasy side as Warhammer and the science fiction side as 40K. Everyone called it 40K back then too, for that matter. It was a book for both games, to be fair. And this one talked about, or I'll put it on the mark right now. This one talked about Khorne and Slaanesh and promised that there were further books coming. This was actually the very first book that also introduced the concept of gods of law that unfortunately never came. That was really interesting. And the gods of law weren't necessarily good beings. They were both this weird polarity where chaos was just a complete randomness and a destruction of civilization and deconstructing of things. Law was about the absolute. But the gods of law weren't necessarily caring because they were just absolutes. They were just reflections of those concepts. And that's ultimately what the chaos powers were just reflections of concepts. So in this edition of 40K, actually, the Khorne was obviously the god of blood, murder, and all that, but he also represented every soldier in the galaxy as well. So Khorne also represented the honor of fighting, the code of chivalry. He wasn't just insane butchering, but he was a militaristic god and encapsulated everything about fighting. Yes, the dark side, but also ultimately kind of the light side. It's part of his nature, and he cannot refuse it. So I thought that as a kid, that the concept of chaos powers just reflecting everything in the mortal universe, I thought just blew my mind. That was just so interesting. Slaanesh, at this time, was not created by the hedonistic expression of Eldar. I do not believe. You have to forgive me. This was a while back ago. All right, so let's do a little bit of more show and tell. This came out later as well. This was 89, if I'm not mistaken. 1989. And this was a compilation of, or I'll put it on the mark. There you go. Gaio today. Thank you, Gaio, for being on in the DJ booth today. And this was actually one of their very first compilations because they had their White Dwarf. It was actually in this format, a larger book format. The magazine was roughly this tall, actually. And they compiled all the articles from the White Dwarf at the time. Because again, the company was very small. They couldn't necessarily produce rule books all the time. Anyway, they compiled all those articles into this 40K thing. And check out the back. This is when they also introduced Harlequins. Harlequins are so cool. So cool. Again, the concept of these elves telling story through dance and the scatterer fields that they used to have where they would just, as they moved, their images or their technology would blur their image and just shoot a kaleidoscope of colors so you'd have a hard time hitting them. Was just so cool. Kisses, or I say death kiss maybe? Anyway, that little monofilament wire that they would just punch into you and turn you into soup from the inside out was extremely deadly back in the day. And in fact, Harlequins were like the most elite, the most deadliest hand-to-hand combat fighters in all the game. Man, I wish Harlequins were more like that in 40K these days. But this was a very cool book. One of the coolest things I have in my collection as well. All right, here's a few more. Only got 2 more things to show you. I'm not going to show you my entire collection because that would be forever. This has also been reprinted now. This is an original book. This one came out in 1990. So I'll put it on the mark, Gaio. There it is. This one introduces the concepts of Nurgle and Tzeentch. And this was also extremely cool. Gave all sorts of cool backgrounds to 40K. I hunted for this for a little while, even back then, because everything back then was hard to get. This was an expensive book even at the time. I didn't even realize it was like $50 back then. Like $50, yeah, it was like something like $50 back then, give or take. This is $1990. I don't know if $50 translates into today's dollars, but it's a heck of a lot more than $50. For those of you that say, you know, the hobby was cheap back in the day, well, not always. All right, last one, simply because it's an army close to my heart. The Orcs, baby. This was so cool. This introduced the Orcs as a space race. It talks about the history of the Orcs and the Brain Boys and everything like that. This is not even a book. It's a slipcover with, I guess they had given you a way to put it in a binder. Hey, Guy, you could focus on that. So there's some of the color plates that were in this little thing. This was so freaking cool. If you guys love Orcs, this adds so much backstory. Everything that's referenced now in 40K came from this Rogue Trader period or pays homage to it. If you want a bigger picture and more detailed, more granular storytelling of 40K, try to get your hands on some Rogue Trader stuff, I guess. I don't know what all the stuff would cost now. It probably is, it's probably pretty expensive, I would imagine. I loved Orcs, but I wasn't a massive fan of them at the time. At the time, Orcs were a little too goofy for me to really dive in and bust them out as an army. My actual first army was Eldar. This was back when Eldar used to have las guns. And it was not until, I believe, was it 3rd edition or 2nd edition, where the design studio wanted a design direction. I think if everyone had a laser gun, it didn't feel very distinct. And that's when they decided to, shuriken catapults were the Eldar weapon. And they got rid of las guns for all Eldar. But jet bikes were around then. The Wraith Lord, as you see right now, was called Eldar Dreadnought. All the races had, well, all 3 races. It was Space Marines, Orcs, and Eldar. There were Imperial Guard then, and there were squats, but they were incredibly unpopular, to say the least. Squats were not a popular army at all. One of the reasons, I guess, why they disappeared. They look like little miniature Hell's Angels, I guess, bikers with goggles and long beards, and yeah, they look kind of dumb. They're Weeble exosuits, armors. They look. Anyway, if you're a lover of squats, I apologize. I don't mean to give you the harsh truth of how ugly your army was. But they were not a good-looking army, I don't think. At least not to me. Very, very biased opinion, for sure. So it wasn't until 3rd edition I really got into Orcs. And then from that point onward, those are the Brian Nelson days. And when Brian Nelson joined the company, he reimagined the Orc range. And they went from these goofy clown guys to this like Attila the Hun horde-like race of guys that just were barreling around the galaxy and the world in piles of junk. I freaking loved Orcs. It was actually 3rd edition Codex that introduced the concept of the whole embryonic mushroom thing, where they would just bust out of the ground and they would just be, boom, these genetic super soldiers that just knew what they knew, and off they went. They had one purpose in life: to crush your enemies, to see the blah 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 driven before you, and so on and so forth. I loved orcs. Actually, around 3rd edition is roughly, I think, when I was with part of the company at the time as well. I don't know, it was a long freaking time ago. Let's go for the chat for 1 sec. All right, so what we got right now, we got Diogo. I love the people that have only played the last 3 or 4 years and talk about how bad the game is. Come from someone that's played 20 years, let me tell you, there were some really dark times. You are not kidding, my friend. Bike to Toronto, you sure it wasn't a horse? Funny guy, funny guy. Jason Bershenko, the big boy was worth it though, yeah, for sure. Rory Pinto, Daka Daka, absolutely, you're talking my language. Then we got Remy on the actual chat. Welcome, Remy. Orcs, 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 orcs. Yes, absolutely. Jason Bershenko, the truth comes out. Dirty knife here, yes. Elder are cool, man. I don't know what else to say. It definitely became cooler when they started fleshing out their the history, the fall of their race. And it was their fall of the race that wakened the entity Slaanesh in the outer realm. I thought that was just such an amazing, epic concept. And it was actually where the Eye of Terror is currently right now, was where their capital planet or their seat of power was. And it was that giant titanic expression of hedonistic pleasure that ripped a hole in time and space for light years around that planet. I thought that was just absolutely amazing. So then we got Razorbat. Chaos had a Dreadnought too. Yeah, of course they did. They had the Space Marine Dreadnought, basically. The light and dark side of Space Marines have existed for quite a long time. And they were cute little guys too. The little Fury Abundance, that was like it was a guy about like yay big actually. The Orc Dreadnought was roughly, the tallest one was the, I think I still have mine actually. The old metal Elder Dreadnought was roughly about that big. The plastic is much bigger now, but whatever, it happens. Remy coming in with leaf luffers here. I don't know what you mean by that, all right. Razorbat, for years it was Ron's Orcs versus my Imperial Guard back in Rogue Trader 2nd edition days. I still have my Rogue Trader Guard. Yeah, absolutely. The Rogue Trader Guard definitely exists. They were not a popular army. But the old little medals, even back when they used to have Beastmen as part of Guard, they weren't necessarily called abhumans back in the day. They're just called mutants, if I remember correctly. Ratlings were Ratlings. Yes, the Halflings were there as well. And of course, they were called Ogres, not Ogryn back in the day as well. Rory chiming in, I was getting into 40K when you were a manager of the Eaton Center store in 3rd edition. Holy crap. At that moment, I was probably maybe popping in and out. I was never managing Eaton Center. First store I managed actually was Mississauga. It was the Square One store. And then I went from that to, no, sorry, that's incorrect. The very first store I managed was actually Burlington store. Yeah, it was actually the Burlington store. And then they moved me due to performance to Square One. And then if I went from Square One to then started developing an area, I had Square One and then Burlington. And then I had Square One, Burlington, Ontario. And then I had Square One, Burlington, Ontario to London, and then Ottawa. And then I had East Coast. It was a heck of a journey, that was for sure. A lot of fond memories working for GW. I know a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say, and I'm not going to tell you that it was perfect, but I have a tremendous amount of fond memories working for the company. A lot of my customers that come to my shop were people I met for the very first time through the company. So I do not regret working for the company. I absolutely adore doing so. And again, it's not every single moment. That would be foolish to say. But I have a lot of fond memories working for the company. Tyranids are still the coolest faction. They were definitely one of the absolute coolest factions. When Tyranids started coming out for the very first time in a serious way as an army, I was working on the trade side, and people were trading in Magic collections to buy Tyranids. And at that time, that wasn't something that happened very often at all. It was just something that popped up when we were talking to the business side of things. And there were a few stores commenting on that. And that was like a seminal moment. Tyranids definitely struck a primal chord with the customer base. Yeah, Tyranids were so super cool when they first came out. They're still cool right now. Razorbat, he's saying, nobody. Chaos had the crazy scorched over one with the claw in RT. Scorched, man. Oh, I'm gonna have to like dive into the memory banks. Chaos was definitely not one of the more popular factions in my area either. Everything was Space Wolves and Eldar. Everyone was Space Wolves. They were the two most broken armies in the game at the time of Rogue Trader. Cyclone missile launchers just devastated the world and everything in it. That was like 2nd edition. Yeah, that was like 2nd edition when you used a virus bomb and pulsar rockets, and it was crazy days for sure. This is Vic. Yeah, all right, fair enough. Vic, you definitely have chops, that's for sure. You've been in the game for quite a while. Alan, one of my wonderful people that I met through Games Workshop action. We love you. Go on. You are great for the community. Well, I'm something for the community, that's for sure. Oh, we got my balls on the chat. Look at you. What are you doing on my 40K stream? You don't love 40K. Well, maybe you used to. Late 3rd is when I started. Saw Tyranids and knew what I needed to start because I love the bugs in Starship Troopers and the Zerg in StarCraft. The guys who created StarCraft were such huge fans of Games Workshop that they pitched it. They pitched the game, but they couldn't afford the license to do it. So they came out with Warcraft, their very first game, and it was like an RTS game. It was what is known as an RTS game nowadays, I guess. Although even the concept of RTS is an old-ass term now too. But at the time, it was groundbreaking. No one had done it really before then, and when you dove into World of Warcraft, they paid homage to Warhammer all the time. I remember their last game they did as an RTS for Warcraft, actually, if you clicked on the Griffin Rider repeatedly, you'd get them to say more things. And the thing that that Griffin Rider said is eventually you got them to say, this Warhammer costs 40K. And it was a tongue-in-cheek joke. Eventually they crossed the line with Steam Tanks, and Games Workshop was like, okay, pals. Okay, buddy, you got to curb that back. That's no longer an homage. You're now getting into intellectual property. So they had to pull that out of the game, but it was neat. It was neat. So when I comment on 40K, this is the long story short here now, or try to be shorter. When I comment on 40K, understand that it's coming from the softiest, gushiest part of my nerd heart. 40K has been in my life for like, oh gosh, ever. I love the game and the universe. Have I loved every edition of the game? No. But community, I've said this before in many different discussions. I'll say it again now. We are absolutely blessed with a phenomenal community here in Southern Ontario. It does range though. I mean, it ranges anywhere from the hyper-competitive to the most absolute story-driven players. But every single one of them, I'm being very, very facetious. Every single one of them are absolutely phenomenal people. I love running events for all these guys. It's always been something I love doing, back even when I used to work for Games Workshop back in the day. So understand when I talk about 40K that I'm talking about it from the best possible motions. And if that doesn't give me enough credibility, then it is what it is, folks. You obviously can make your decision on what I have to say, what I've said so far up to this point. I love the game. I do love 10th. I do want more personality. And I've wrestled with this. What the heck does that mean? What is the perfect, cool competitive thing while still being cool story? And I guess I'll give you a couple examples. Some of you might think they're poor examples because they're really powerful examples. But the orders for Imperial Guard right now, Astra Militarum, are a cool, competitive, and narrative thing. The concept of Cabal points, if not their execution for 1,000 Suns as a wizard army, is a very cool, competitive, very obviously competitive, and very cool story-driven thing. The concept of the Shadow and the Warp, as when you're playing Tyranids, and the fact that they do battle shocks across the field. Is it a hyper-competitive thing? No. Does it have impact on the game? Yes. And is an incredibly cool narrative thing. I want my scenarios for 40K to be that kind of feel. I want them to be competitive. I want them to feel like this is a good tournament scenario, but I also want them to be reflective of the battle. And that's my greatest criticism of 40K currently right now, is that that is really just not the case. People are, players prefer tables to be very, very cookie cutter, and you feel like you're entering, like I've said, a soccer pitch or a football stadium. And that is really, really cool. And for all of you that love that, love you all. I definitely understand where you're coming from. And I think and the game is that. I think it's hyper that. The problem is that there's really not a lot of space to express the game any other way. And you're like, well, no, you could do cool narrative things in 40K, Lionel. The problem with 40K right now is it is ludicrously deadly. If you don't play with enough terrain, there's not really much of a game to play, as things just get blown off the field. You need the terrain, and it really does need to be dense to play a cool action-packed game of 40K. And the unfortunate thing about that is it's hard for you to build cool narrative tables or even start approaching a more cool vibe of a game because the game locks you, handcuffs you, because of how deadly it is. I would love to see the craziness of the damage output of the game currently right now to be unilaterally decreased across all armies. Now, this is more of an addition change type request. This isn't midstream. We can't do this mid 10th edition. It would have to be a fundamental change to the game. But the concept that I can't be out in the open at any time is just terrible. 30K, for instance, has obviously a 40K vibe to it because it's set in the universe, just in a different timeline, hence the name 30K. You could be out in the open and not necessarily die. That would be really super nice. And the fact you could do that means you can change the table drastically. Things don't have to be exactly even on both sides. It would be nice to have to roll for sides and it matter. It doesn't currently matter. You don't roll for sides in 40K. You roll to see who gets to go first. If the game was deadlier, going first might not be as big a deal. But I digress. I I think I've been pretty much fairly clear on how I feel about 40K at the moment. I'm hoping all of you still love the game. And for those of you that don't understand, we're just probably an addition change to hopefully changing that. I hope this video adds to this little pebble, because we're a very tiny channel to be fair. This little pebble adds to a greater avalanche of support for cooler ways of playing 40K. And I know the studio knows this. I know this because they've released boarding action. I know this because they've released campaign books. I know because they still release campaign books. My issue I have with campaign books is because it's a more casual themed thing, they don't enter tournament play because they're too wonky. I don't want wonky rules. What I want is cool narrative rules. I want rules that are competitive and flavorful so that it can be used in a tournament experience, so that it can be expressed. So 40K soul can be expressed in a tournament format is where I would love the game to be. All right, as we approach the end of this video, hopefully we haven't gone too long. I was aiming for about an hour. I think I'm in that category. We got a few guys. All right, so arguably this is the best version of the game so far. I think, Alan, when you say that statement, my friend, reflect on those 3 archetypes and see where you fall. And I bet you your archetypes cohabit, or I should say, fall in line with where the design direction of the game. Rami, we need to do a massive apocalypse game. Lionel run another Cataclysm event. Yeah, fair enough. Those were some great games for sure. Real fond memories of big floor hammer games. I missed the bunker. It was great, full of great people. It was full of great people, but you know what? A lot of stores have tried picking up the slack, and a lot of stores in the area are full of great people as well. Razorbat777, yes, more personality, more variation is needed, and it is auto-corrected canon to canning. And then my balls, the table is the 3rd player in the game. You're 100% correct. And what we're missing is that 3rd player expressing the narrative story of 40K in tournament play. All right, so that's it for me, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this. We changed it up a little bit. Like I said, we did this video sort of for Age of Sigmar. It was a lot longer. I'm hoping this one, because I'm covering slightly less, that it's a bit shorter. I don't know if I did that well, especially when I went down memory lane. But with all that in mind, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Do you want to see more things like this? I like to do a series of friends lists and people I know who are Army specialists, and invite them over to the channel to talk about that. Would you be interested in seeing that? I don't like doing streaming. I do not like doing videos where the person I'm interviewing isn't in the same room with me. So I'm a touchy-feely kind of guy, and I want the person in front of me. So do you want to see that? Put that in the remarks. Put that in the chat right now. I'd love to hear from you. Drop any comments regarding how you feel about the video, how you feel about yourselves. Do those archetypes ring true with you? All right, with all that in mind, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. Thank you so much for those who chimed in on the chat. Thank you so much for watching this video. And with that, I bid you farewell.